It was a weekday afternoon at the CVS pharmacy in Phoenix, Scottsdale. As Arizona's intense sunlight streamed into the store, Maggie worked at the pristine and orderly prescription counter. The occasional dry breeze wafted in through the drive-through window, while the setting sun cast a warm glow on the rows of medicine bottles on the shelves. "Mrs. Brown, let me explain your medications. Take one blood pressure pill after breakfast, and for your arthritis medication, aim to take it about 30 minutes after meals." Maggie continued her explanation with a gentle smile, speaking slowly and carefully. She had earned a reputation among local patients for her clear and easy-to-understand instructions. "Thank you, Maggie. Your explanations are always so clear. I come to this pharmacy because you're here. Please take care on your way home. Don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions." After seeing the elderly lady off, Maggie unconsciously pressed her right wrist. She had been experiencing mild pain more frequently lately. In the mornings, when she started checking prescriptions, she often noticed discomfort in her wrist. "It's hurting again, seems to be happening more often lately. But it's probably just fatigue." As Maggie muttered to herself, her fellow pharmacist cast a worried glance her way. "Maggie, it's time for your break. I'll cover for you. You're looking a bit pale lately." "Thanks. I'll take a short rest." Sunday afternoon at the Henderson home in north-central Phoenix. Family had gathered at the elegant colonial-style house that was celebrating its 30th year. The well-maintained lawn in the front yard boasted roses that their mother carefully tended, delighting shoppers returning from Paradise Valley Mall. The warm light from the living room windows hinted at the family gathering about to begin. Ashley's voice rang out with more excitement than anyone had ever seen from her. A large diamond ring sparkled on her finger. Ryan finally proposed. He reserved a special window seat at this wonderful restaurant. "Oh, how wonderful. When's the wedding? Have you picked a venue yet?" Their mother Patricia clapped her hands in delight, already dreaming about wedding preparations. "Our precious daughter, finally." Their father William smiled with misty eyes. The strict father who had worked as a teacher for many years was showing rare emotion. Maggie watched her sister's joyful expression while maintaining a modest smile. "Congratulations, Ashley. Ryan, please take good care of her." "Thanks, Maggie. I will." Ryan maintained his refreshing smile throughout. In his stylish suit, he looked like he could have stepped out of a luxury real estate advertisement. "Let's take a commemorative photo. It's such a special day, after all." As the family gathered at their mother's call, Maggie hid her aching wrist behind her back and smiled for the camera, desperately maintaining her composure without anyone noticing. 1 week later. In an examination room at Mayo Clinic's Phoenix campus. Beyond the spacious waiting room, a courtyard with a peaceful fountain was visible. In the examination room equipped with the latest medical devices, Maggie waited alone for her results. "Based on the condition of your joints and multiple test results, there's a high probability of progressive rheumatoid arthritis." Maggie's expression clouded at Dr. Crawford's gentle but confident voice. "How serious is it? Can I continue working?" The doctor faced Maggie's trembling voice with a sincere expression. "If we start appropriate treatment early, we can control the symptoms. I'd like to propose treatment with biological agents." However, I need to explain the costs up front. How much will it cost? About $45,000 annually. Even with insurance, you'll need to cover about $15,000 in out-of-pocket expenses each year. There are payment plans available, but... Maggie quietly took out her smartphone and checked her account balance. The number showed $23,000, savings she had carefully accumulated over 10 years as a pharmacist. I have to figure something out. I need to keep working. Take some time to think about the treatment options. It might be good to discuss this with your family. Let's work together to find the best treatment plan for you. Maggie's deep sigh echoed in the quiet examination room as she gazed out the window. A week later, Maggie was again facing Dr. Crawford. The morning sun streaming through the window reflected off the newly installed state-of-the-art MRI machine, softly illuminating the entire room. The sound of the fountain from the waiting room slightly eased her tense heart. We'll do the initial administration for 2 weeks and monitor your response. Since there's a possibility of side effects, we'll observe your progress carefully, especially during the first month. You might experience nausea, headaches, and possibly fever. Please contact us immediately if these occur. Determination and anxiety mingled in Maggie's eyes as she nodded seriously at the doctor's explanation. In her white coat pocket was a paper with household budget calculations she had worked on until late last night. She couldn't put down her calculator until she had figured out how to manage the amount through overtime and holiday shifts. The FSA balance check, insurance deductible calculations, all these numbers were dancing in her head. I understand. Even if side effects occur, I want to continue working as much as possible. I want to be there for my patients as a pharmacist. Yes, balancing work is important. But don't overdo it. Consider adjusting your work hours if needed. Be especially careful during the initial administration period. Dr. Crawford's calm voice carried both professional confidence and personal kindness. His experience caring for many patients while raising his 7-year-old daughter as a single father gave weight to his words. After leaving the examination room, Maggie headed straight to work. She had scheduled an early morning appointment to avoid being late. Phoenix was still wrapped in morning mist. Arriving at CVS Pharmacy, Maggie went directly to the store manager. The experienced manager seemed to sense something just by looking at her expression. Eyes that had watched over her work for 10 years didn't miss the change. "Jim, do you have a moment?" "Of course, Maggie. Please, sit down. You're here early today." The manager quietly prompted her while offering a warm cup of coffee. Steam rose from the coffee on the desk, dissolving into the morning air. "Actually, I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis." Maggie made her utmost effort to keep her voice from trembling. Her hand shook slightly as she handed over the medical certificate. "I need treatment, but I want to continue working. Would it be possible to adjust my shifts? I need time for hospital visits and monitoring after medication." "Maggie, you've been our valued employee for 10 years. Patients trust you deeply. Let's work together to figure out what accommodations you need. Your health comes first." Maggie's eyes welled up at the manager's words. The anxiety that had been building inside her seemed to ease a little. The early morning pharmacy was still quiet, with only the scent of disinfectant in the air. That weekend, Under Arizona's scorching sun, Maggie accompanied her sister Ashley to view a model home in an upscale neighborhood in the quiet residential area of Arcadia District. Luxurious new mansions lined the streets with Camelback Mountain as their backdrop. Well-maintained lawns spread across the yards, with palm trees swaying elegantly in the wind. Look, Maggie. 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. Isn't this open kitchen gorgeous? Wouldn't it be wonderful to host Thanksgiving dinner here? Ashley's voice bubbled with excitement. She seemed to be already imagining herself cooking at the stainless steel island kitchen. Her profile still held the same innocence from her childhood days. Actually, we can offer this property at 20% below market value. Property values in this area are rising yearly, so you can expect future asset appreciation as well. The suited real estate agent began his explanation with a perfect smile. Even the way he handed out his glossy business card exuded sophistication. Beside him, Ryan's expression suggested he had already decided to purchase. His eyes seemed to view the house as a mirror reflecting his own success. $850,000. Maggie muttered. The amount, more than 10 times her annual salary, felt unreal. The temperature difference between herself worrying about medical expenses and her sister excited about a major purchase left her feeling somewhat melancholic. Mom and Dad are giving us $500,000 for the down payment, Ashley announced happily. They said it's part of raising their children. Didn't they tell you, Maggie? An indescribable emotion welled up in Maggie's chest. 10 years ago, when she started her job, it was different. They had even been reluctant to be her guarantor when she rented a modest apartment. When had her sister become more special to them than she was? Could parental love really be so different? Back home, Maggie sat with her household account book in her apartment. Her eyes, tired from staring at the treatment payment schedule, showed her exhaustion. Monthly payments of $1,250. Her savings would rapidly diminish. Treatment-related expenses had already started appearing on her credit card statement. Still, she couldn't give up. Overtime at the pharmacy increased, and she continued working on holidays. From early morning until late at night, she kept serving patients with a smile. On weekends, fatigue would overwhelm her entire body, and sometimes joint pain would wake her up. Still, Maggie desperately maintained her smile. Gently rubbing her aching wrist, she prepared for the next day's work. I'll manage somehow. I have to. I have my own life. She carefully organized medical receipts and highlighted important points in the medical condition documents. This was preparation for asking her parents for help tomorrow. The living room light illuminated the yellow highlighter marks on crucial sections. Outside the window, Arizona's dry wind had begun to blow. In the sky, as if encouraging her, countless stars twinkled. Tomorrow, she would tell them everything. Maggie took a deep breath. How would her parents react? Would they understand? Amid mixed anxiety and hope, she continued preparing herself for tomorrow. Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Maggie sat tensely in the living room of the Henderson home in north central Phoenix. Steam rose slowly from the coffee her mother had served, disappearing into the heavy air. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting shadows on her mother's favorite lace curtains. About that house we saw the other day. Ashley began excitedly. I got a catalog for additional fixtures. We can even put a barbecue set on the terrace. That's lovely. Patricia nodded happily. William, we can have Christmas parties there. Father nodded contentedly while studying the house blueprints. Maggie quietly gripped the envelope containing her documents beside the sofa. Her hands were trembling slightly. Dad, Mom. Maggie took a deep breath and slowly began. I need to talk to you about something. What is it? Mother's voice still carried traces of her good mood. However, noticing Maggie's serious expression, she slightly moderated her tone. She took out the medical certificate she had prepared. Actually, I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I wanted to ask if you could help a little with the treatment costs. The room's atmosphere froze instantly. Father's expression suddenly hardened, and Mother's eyes darted around in confusion. Ashley couldn't lift her gaze from the blueprints. The treatment costs, even with insurance, will be $15,000 annually. Maggie continued her explanation, desperately controlling her trembling voice. The monthly payments are difficult. Right now, Ashley's down payment takes priority. Father's voice was cold. Your treatment can wait. Mother agreed. It's an important time in your sister's life. You can endure, can't you? Besides, as a pharmacist, don't you get hospital discounts? Those words constricted Maggie's chest. Her vision blurred. Tears she had desperately held back began streaming down her cheeks. Ashley muttered in a small voice. I'm sorry. But we found this wonderful house. This is a once-in-a-lifetime purchase. Maggie silently nodded. There was nothing left to say. She slowly stood up and returned the documents to her bag. Her hands shook, nearly dropping the envelope. I'll be going now. She forced out these words with all her strength and left the living room. Family photos line the hallway to the entrance. Young Maggie holding baby Ashley. A family photo from high school graduation. Every picture captured happy smiles. Now, those smiles seemed to mock her. After getting into her car, Maggie rested her forehead on the steering wheel for a while. Her hands trembled as she started the engine. Her vision was distorted by tears. Taking deep breaths repeatedly, she somehow managed to drive away. On the way home, Phoenix's cityscape was turning to dusk. When she stopped at a red light at an intersection, Maggie suddenly burst into tears. In the car where no one could hear, her emotions overflowed. Back in her apartment, Maggie stood by the window, staring at the darkening sky. Street lights began turning on one by one as night fell. In the darkness of her unlit room, she quietly whispered, I have my own life. I won't rely on anyone anymore. Early the next morning, Maggie was already awake before her alarm went off. As the morning sun began streaming through her apartment window, she started moving with new determination. She sat at her computer, beginning to type emails. One was about consulting on payment plans for medical expenses. Next to it was an email confirming an appointment for a loan consultation at the bank. Despite the pain in her wrist, Maggie carefully proceeded with her preparations. She chose her favorite suit and applied her makeup more carefully than usual. Looking at herself in the mirror, she spoke firmly. It's okay. I'll be okay, on my own. Speaking to the empty room, she opened the door. Late that night, her cell phone's ring shattered the apartment's silence. Maggie, who had been lying in bed, was suddenly torn from an uneasy dream. The screen showed "Mom," something that had never happened at this hour before. Hello? Maggie's voice still carried traces of sleep. Maggie, help. Her mother's voice on the other end was clearly distraught. We were deceived, it's all gone. She could hear her father's rough breathing in the background. His usually dignified voice was gone, replaced by incoherent words. Stay calm. I'm coming now. Maggie hurriedly changed from her nightwear. Her hands trembled as she pulled clothes from the drawer. She put on a thicker cardigan than usual for driving through Phoenix at midnight. The desert nights get surprisingly cold, contrary to the daytime heat. As she started the car engine, Maggie's mind was in chaos. Her parents' distressed state. Her father's crying voice she had never heard before. None of it felt real. Her headlights cut through the darkness. The midnight roads were eerily quiet. 30 minutes later, she arrived at her parents' house. The living room, usually so orderly, looked as if a hurricane had passed through. Documents were scattered across the floor, her mother sat shaking on the sofa, and her father stood frozen with his hand to his forehead. What happened? Maggie asked quietly. That real estate agent, it was a scam. Mother's voice trembled. The property had serious defects, not just severe foundation damage. Hazardous materials were used, and the seismic resistance was falsified, everything was fake. What about the $500,000 down payment? Gone, all gone. Father answered in a strained voice. And that's not all. Our retirement funds, even loans against our pension. No. Maggie's eyes widened. The funds they had carefully saved for their retirement. The savings that were proof of their life's work as teachers, gone in an instant. And the guarantor contract too. Mother continued through tears. What are we going to do? Among the scattered documents, Maggie spotted a familiar company logo. She felt the blood drain from her face. It was evidence of a fraud group that had been reported victimizing others in the area. The next afternoon, Maggie sat facing Dr. Crawford at Mayo Clinic. It was her regular checkup appointment. Dr. Crawford began speaking in a calm voice. Actually, Maggie, we're about to start clinical trials for a new medication. Clinical trials. Yes. If you participate, we can significantly reduce the treatment costs. Of course, I'll explain all the risks in detail. Dr. Crawford continued his explanation while carefully taking out documents. Maggie's eyes welled up with tears. The afternoon light streaming through the window gently illuminated the tears rolling down her cheeks. She noticed a rainbow drawing by Dr. Crawford's 7-year-old daughter Sophie hanging on the examination room wall. That night, in the living room of her parents' house, the family gathered again in front of stacks of organized documents. This time, Ashley was absent. To think we abandoned you like that. I'm so sorry. Father's voice was filled with deep regret. I was such a foolish father. We were so foolish. Mother continued through tears. We lost sight of what was truly important. Maggie quietly gazed at them both. Any hatred or anger had disappeared. Instead, she saw her parents' vulnerability and humanity that she hadn't noticed before. Let's all look forward now, Maggie said firmly. I have some good news too. While she explained about the clinical trials, her parents nodded silently. Their expressions showed complex emotions, as if they were recognizing their daughter's strength for the first time. Outside the window, stars twinkled in the Arizona night sky. On the living room table lay plans for their new life. A modest apartment living. A blueprint for taking sure steps forward, though simple. Maggie took a deep breath and made a silent vow. To support her parents. To continue her treatment. And above all, to overcome this trial and build a new kind of family. 1 year later, in spring. A refreshing breeze swept through Phoenix. In Dr. Crawford's backyard, preparations for their regular weekend barbecue were underway. Maggie watched through the kitchen window while making salad. She could see 7-year-old Sophie setting the table with her father. Dad, the plates are facing the wrong way, Sophie pointed out with a serious expression. Her gesture reminded Maggie of herself as a little girl. The clinical trial had shown better results than expected, and Maggie's symptoms were steadily improving. Above all, her life with Dr. Crawford, now her husband, had become her greatest support. Maggie, your parents are here. Heading to the entrance, she found her parents standing there with a small potted plant. These were new shoots from the herbs her mother carefully tended. Though they no longer had their large garden, she now lovingly grew plants on their small apartment balcony. Mom, Dad, welcome. Father smiled gently. His expression had lost its former rigidity, replaced by a peaceful warmth. We're so proud of your strength. Thank you for teaching us the true meaning of family. Mother still says this sometimes, getting teary-eyed. The weekly family dinners had become their precious tradition. Within their simpler life, her parents had found new happiness. Time spent with Maggie. Watching Sophie grow. These had become their most treasured possessions. Oh, an email from Ashley. Maggie picked up her smartphone. She had started a new life in Portland, Oregon. Though it took time to recover from the emotional shock of breaking off her engagement, she now had a corporate job and was moving forward on her own strength. I'm really sorry about back then. These words were always included in her occasional messages. In the yard, Dr. Crawford was starting to light the grill. He was cheerfully talking to Maggie's parents about events at the hospital. The table was set with her mother's homemade salad and her father's favorite wine. Maggie, could you come help me with the meat? Dr. Crawford's voice brought Maggie back to the present. Yes, coming. Looking at James's profile as he stood by the grill, Maggie whispered in her heart. This is the path I chose. And this is my happiness. Now, there were no dark shadows in Maggie's heart. Instead, there was tangible happiness right before her eyes. Her rheumatoid symptoms had stabilized thanks to the latest treatment. She found her work as a pharmacist even more rewarding than before. Hey, Maggie. James spoke with a serious expression. Would you like to join the research team for the new treatment starting next month? I think your experience as a patient would be valuable. Maggie thought for a moment, then nodded. She could use her experience to help others in similar situations. It felt like the beginning of a new hope. As night fell, family laughter echoed through the yard. Under the starry sky, the small grill cast a warm light. Next month would be Sophie's birthday party. The month after that, they had plans for a short trip with her parents. Maggie took a deep breath. Arizona's night air felt refreshing in her lungs. This is my story, she thought as she walked toward the circle of her family. The ridgeline of Camelback Mountain cast a beautiful shadow against the twilight sky. The gentle breeze rustled the garden trees, as if announcing the beginning of a new season.